Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I'm going to do a low polygon model of a Mustang. It's a 390 GT, but it's a stylized version. So what I do is I shrink the length of the car, but I have copied the wheels before. So now I paste the wheels back on that shrunken version, and it kind of looks like a short car because the wheels are the reference for proportion because they are still circular. Then I do the same for the front view, but only 80%, I think 90% actually, and then the top view I have to shrink 90% of the size and then 70% of the length. I take that image that I made and I put it on a plane. I slice the plane up and move the planes into place so that I can create this sort of projection box. And it's inside this box that I'm going to be modeling the actual model of the car. I'm lining up things by making sure that I have center elements lined up. And the vertical alignment is also I'm making sure that the wheels are sitting on the ground. Now, when you make a box for car modeling, I usually do the typical just creating a box and then cutting it in half. And the technique that I use for box modeling vehicles is I move the vertices onto their final position. I don't move them kind of like to the bounding box and then eventually I'll mesh smooth them in because this will be low polygon model. This will not be mesh smooth. Therefore, I actually move the vertices into their final position. And as I add cuts to the mesh, the next vertices that will be added will also be positioned to their final position. So gradually I'm adding the detail of the car, but I'm making sure that things won't be needing any change in the future. And that's kind of a way to speed things up. Most of the work is done by adding a section and then adding a cut in that section by just doing a slice or a connect between all of the edges. What that does is it creates extra vertices for me to work with, and I just position them in the place where the silhouette needs it. Okay, so I'm doing here is trying to match the shape of the car to the shape that I have on the blueprints. Now, what you saw just there, the opaque version, it still doesn't really look like a Mustang. And a lot of that has to do with the height of the car, the way that it's shaped underneath, and the fact that it doesn't have the typical Mustang headlights. Now I'm also still trying to figure out the main shapes here, the windshield, for example. How round is the roof of the car just off of the windshield? Also the bumps over the back wheels, those are very typical of, well, mostly American muscle cars, but very typical of the Mustang in a very iconic shape. And I'm trying to get that right because the 390 GT is a very specific model with a different back end. Now for the front of the car, I just took this shape here and I did the headlights very simply just by extruding those polygons in. And I extruded those in and I added a bit of a mesh, well, not a mesh smooth, but I tessellated the polygons so that I could make it into a round shape. So you can see there me extending and scaling up those edges to be able to extrude a round shape. Now once I do that, if you notice previously, if you pause the video just before, you see that the headlights kind of look like the modern GT, the modern Mustang's headlights, but I just made it like the old one. The front bumper was created just by extruding, just by cloning some of the polygons there. And it still doesn't really look like a car, and it's because I don't have the wheel pits. Now I'm going to cut those out, and I'm going to cap them and close off the mesh. I don't think that this will be using rendering, real-time light projection, but I just want the mesh to be closed so that I don't have any trouble then with lighting when I have to, in fact, render it off. So here I just added a few more cuts in the mesh just to make sure that I have all the access to all of the shapes that I need. What I did there, I just went back to Photoshop to lighten up the image so that it looks a little bit clearer here on 3D Studio Max. Now there's still the back fender to be done, and not the back fender, the back bumper. And the back bumper is kind of odd because it is meshed in with the rest of the body. So that means that I have to have more detail than the one that I wanted to, and for the simple fact that I want to do some material separation. I don't think that the final version will have material separation. I just wanted it for now while I was modeling it because that helps you read the mesh of your car. Now what I'm going to do here is apply a Madcap Shader to the object. And what this does is it takes an image and applies it to the object almost as a reflection. So you can see that the car now looks like it's been coated with a clear coat, and it's very reflective. And this helps me see how the mesh is laid out and how well things transition from one point to the mesh to the other. Is it smooth? Does it need a smoothing group breaks? Does it need something? So now I make my own Madcap by hand, which is kind of ridiculous to do, but I just felt like I wanted to. So what I do is I just shade a sphere, and then I kind of fake a reflection here by adding some highlights and then some spots there to act as lights on the ceiling. This is almost like windows from a car dealership or something. Once I apply it to the car, it still looks a bit bright, but that's because the shader is wrong. Now it looks a lot better. It's obviously green because the 390 GT is a model made popular by the film Bullitt, or the movie Bullitt with Steve McQueen, and he drove an olive green Mustang, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get here. I also forgot to create the material ID for the back glass, which I honestly don't know the specific name of. And here I think I'm trying to look for a ref map, there you go, to create a chrome Madcap. And if I apply that here, you can see that it now looks like it's either metal or kind of chromey-ish bit. And I do that for the back bumper as well. Now, because the image was so sharp and clear, it really looked like chrome. It didn't really look like brushed metal. And that was something that I was not enjoying. I needed to add the side scoop, the air scoop for the, I think, rear brakes maybe. So I'm seeing if the mesh that I had was helpful enough, and it kind of worked. But the problem here is that I was trying to do this as a smooth thing and try to keep things inside the same smoothing group. But that really messes up the lighting. And it would mean that I would need to add more geometry, which I really wasn't into. So I just separated the smoothing groups. That gives it a sharp look, a clean, sharp look. And the side scoop, for some reason here, well, I don't know if these are scoops. They're just details. They look really cool in the car. But for some reason, the shader was not cooperating, and it keeps flashing back to white. So I wanted to do a spinning gift at the end, but it didn't work because every time I would refresh the view, it would reset that part of the mesh to white, which was ridiculous. You see that shaking of the camera? That was just me trying to see what the reflection looked like. So I did that for the front wheel. I'll eventually do that for the back wheel as well. And as you can see, this is the finished model. It still needs wheels, and wheels, the way that I make them for this kind of cars, are very simple. It's just a 12-sided cylinder with 3 segments, and then I scale the ends a bit so that we get that sort of rounded look for the edge of the tire. And then I just separate the smoothing groups here on what would be the hubcaps or the wheels, the wheel frames. And here I'm just talking about the lift back concept, the car with the rear suspension raised, and how we could do that using smoothing groups or just by rotating the mesh. I personally prefer rotating the mesh because that's actually what happens in real life. They don't deform the car. So this is the final version of the model, and I hope you guys enjoy this, and thank you so much for watching. Take care.